Three. And good afternoon, and welcome to this afternoon's Marketing Gem, where we're talking about how to get the best out of your social media. We all use social media, and there's a complete mass of social media channels out there, be it Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, Periscope, Snapchat, Instagram, and LinkedIn. These are just a few of what you can and cannot use and may use. Now, not all of them are going to be appropriate for you. Some of them are going to work better for you than others. But there are a few pros and cons to each one. So what we're going to talk about today is how you can use social media and how for your SME or a small organization, and how it differs from your personal accounts and what to look out for. So joining us today, I'm joined by actually the full group of 4 panelists. And we're going to start off with Alan, who has done quite a lot of social media marketing for various large companies and in the life sciences sector. Alan.
Hi, Diane. Thanks for inviting me along. Yes, that's true. I've been involved in marketing life science products for something like 30 years now, and probably over the last 4 or 5 years, social media has played a more important part in the marketing mix. And I'm quite happy to discuss some of the challenges that I've faced in the past, and also the successes that we've gleaned from using social media platforms. Okay.
And Kevin, this one should be right up your street, with your background in the digital media world and in the past, and the fact that you do actually lecture on this subject to job hunters on how to use LinkedIn.
Yes, and LinkedIn is just one arrow in your quiver of social media tools in terms of professional environment. Really looking forward to this conversation. One other thing to note, your social media reputation may not be something that's actually on your books, but in terms of goodwill for business, I've been involved in acquisitions and disposals where audit of the social media reputation was a fundamental part of the valuation. So at the end of the day, this is not something soft and cuddly. This is stuff that creates real value in businesses.
Okay, thank you very much. And Jonathan, who has a wealth of experience for various advertising agencies in the London media world, working for a broad range of clients. And I know that you also lecture on social media with Kevin to job hunters.
Yes, but I have to say I bow to Kevin's better knowledge about these things. I sort of am better at finding out what the pitfalls are, usually by trial and error, more error than trial. But yes, I can help, and I will put in a few pointers, and there are various bits and pieces I've sort of found by discovery on the net, but I'm not, I wouldn't say this was my area of expertise.
Okay, that's great. It is important to remember some of the other things, that it's not just something you do on your own as a isolated action, is it?
It's one of those things. I mean, the role I had or have had, I've always had other people who are primary source of expertise in search engine and internet and things like that. So I grew up in the earlier period of media before the internet got established. But I still did things on the internet that no one else probably has done, like sponsoring the search engine Google. And using that as a primary source of advertising and things like that. But that was in the early days of Google.
Okay. We'll find out more about that a bit later on. And finally, we've got Catherine back. Now, Catherine, you use social media for both your company, for the charity that you do a lot of PR and marketing work for, plus, of course, on your own behalf.
Yes, indeed. There are times when it's hard to get me off social media, and that's something that I'll actually mentioning a little bit later on, how to actually manage your time and make it work for you, as you say, both in a business sense, also yes, with the work I do with a charity, it's important to connect with the audiences that we're trying to reach. and also, yes, from a personal point of view. But even from a personal point of view, since I've had the accounts for both business and charity, I've had to be a lot more careful about what I'm actually putting out there, and that's important to remember as well.
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully you'll pass on a few tips on what to do and what to avoid as we go along the way. As I said earlier, this subject, we're doing this subject this week because it was requested by someone who got in contact with us via the Marketing Gem. They're looking to expand their business. They're a small one-person organisation. They've got the opportunity to expand into new areas, but they're not quite sure about the best ways of using social media, so they've come to us for a few tips, and we're glad to help out. So, Jonathan, as we said earlier, it's not just a case of one person saying, oh yes, we'll just do some social media, is it? It's got to be integrated with all the other marketing activities that a small company is doing.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you have to sort of go back to the basics again. Think about who you're targeting with it. So if it's a consumer-oriented operation, the sort of 80-20 rule, if you're going to start and you've never done it before, probably start with one social media that is frequently used by the majority of the people who you're targeting. So if you've done an audit of any description and asked them the question about do they use the social medias, and if so, what do they use, and use that as a guide to where to start. Make sure that the audience are seeing it and frequenting it. Make sure that what you're doing is appropriate for the environment. So if you're trying to sell business-to-business services or specific services to consumers, don't necessarily go to the first stop and say, oh, I'll put all of this into Facebook because it's big. It may be that your message just doesn't sit comfortably with where you're going to be putting it. Equally, look at the format. You know, some things are more obviously photographic and visual or video, and some things are more text-based. I know that you can pretty well do anything in any space, but that may have a bearing on which way you choose to go. Again, I think Kevin will fill in more information there. Think about the message that you're putting across. Does it add to the audience's experience in the environment? Don't just sort of go, oh, well, lots of people are here, it's video, and bang out a message. If it doesn't sit comfortably or it jars with them, you might be doing more harm than good. And what's in it for the consumer? So when you put the message out there, what is their take out and what is the benefit? And finally, is it consistent and building upon other messaging that I've used in traditional media and or the company philosophy? So just make sure it fits with everything else that you're doing. I think that would be my starting point.
Yeah, okay. And as Jonathan was saying, Kevin, making sure everything fits with your starting point, and that's also applies to the technology, doesn't it? And the channels that you use. Because if you are going to use video, then you need to make sure that you can produce reasonably good quality video that are edited, say, to a reasonable standard.
Absolutely, the technology is key on the execution of what you're doing. Video is a complex technology in its own right. YouTube would be the default platform for distributing your video content. However, if you're interested in better analytics and things like that, you need to go and look at providers that are more expensive. So, part of this whole social media strategy is, what is the budget? What is the message? How do I know that this message has been received, understood, and acted upon? The main social media platform, for example, is Facebook. Most people use Facebook as a break medium. In other words, people don't say, now I must go on Facebook, but rather they're sitting in a queue waiting to get served in their coffee shop or whatever. A quick look at Facebook, and you've got maybe 15 seconds of their attention there. Different things, say for example, if you're putting your message throughout LinkedIn, LinkedIn, for a lot of salespeople will let you reach other business-to-business. Will let you reach other, people in business. There, in fact, your marketing might be approach might be best to use their groups, and you need a very sophisticated strategy there, where you don't just go in and say, hey, buy my stuff, but rather you say, hey, we're part of this and we've got some interesting things to say, and just cultivate interest. Also, you've got Instagram. Instagram's quite popular with sort of people under 24. If you've got some sort of people who know about analytics and the targets, different social media platforms have different usage rates across different age groups and even gender. So Pinterest is a social media network which I don't use. I went on it because somebody I know is a fan of Formula One and said the Formula One coverage on Pinterest was fantastic. I wasn't sure he was being straightforward with me, but I'm sure I'll let that person speak to the value of that. But Pinterest is typically a place where you're going to reach women who are sort of homemakers. I'm on the patient representative group of my doctor's surgery, and they had a real problem with do not attends, wasting doctors' time and stuff, and their analysis showed that the people who were most likely not to attend were women in the age 30 to 39 with young children. And they said, and how can we reach these people? And I said, Twitter. They're all on Twitter, and you tweet them on Friday night at 9 o'clock when they're having a drink, watching Gogglebox, and you tell them your important messages then.
Okay, so Alan, timing is quite important when you're using social media, isn't it?
Was that timing? I didn't quite hear what timing. Yeah, I mean, I guess so, but I would actually go, to be honest, I think what's most important of all is that you need to be basically reaching the people that you're wanting to target. As Jonathan said at the beginning, and the thing there is that obviously when you start with social media, the key is how you build up your followers, because obviously you'll probably be starting from zero, and unless you've got people following you in social media, you're not reaching anybody. So to me, that's the most key thing, is how you get more people following you. Things that I've used in the past is that we've used offers, or we've used prize draws, things like that, to get people to sign up to your social media accounts. Things like if you follow us or like us on this, you'll be entered into a prize draw. For, it doesn't have to be something a major prize or anything like that, but it's a fantastic way of getting people to follow you. Or the other thing, we've done very similar things with Twitter, is getting people to retweet your messages to their followers by simply doing the same sort of thing as well. And that way, I've noticed over the years is that you can actually start to see sort of exponential increases in the number of people following you when you apply these sort of tactics. So I would say that's the number one thing, is getting people following you and then making sure they continue to follow you, to retweet messages, whatever. But that's something we'll probably get onto later in this call.
Okay, very briefly, Catherine, as I said in the introduction, you use Twitter for, as it were, with 3 different hats on. You also use Facebook with 3 different hats on. What are the differences between, say, your personal account and either the CB Graphics account or the local charity account?
And you want me to be brief? Okay. So at the moment, I operate with my business. I operate a Facebook page, a Google Plus page, and a Twitter account. I do the same for the charity, as well as we've got a Facebook account for the charity as well. For the Facebook page for the charity, I actually write a short piece each day as well. And for myself, well, I do whatever, whenever. I mean, I've got accounts on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, Instagram, Pinterest, Periscope. I think I've probably still got a MySpace account somewhere lurking in the archives. If anybody is unfamiliar with MySpace, it was the forerunner to all of them. And I think, in fact, it's still used by musicians and people in the music field more than anything. But what I would say is, first and foremost, you need to decide what it is that you want to try and put across. And I would actually perhaps give each social media platform a bit of a try and see what works best for you, both in terms of how you operate it and also in terms of your target audience. For instance, I mean, Facebook I would always consider to be much more social based. So you've got people chatting, you've got people posting bits and pieces. Oh, these are pictures of my kids. You do see more and more, I think, adverts for and posters and flyers for events taking place, groups, major events, both locally, nationally, as well as activity groups as well, whether it's political, social, or whatever. So Facebook, I would say, is still very much more social media platform rather than business. I've certainly never had much business from Facebook. But the other platforms of Twitter, I would say probably I use Twitter more than anything else. It's really a matter of discovering what's best for you, what's best for your environment. Google Plus is a fantastic source of lots of different tools that you can use, not just on the social business media front, but all the other connections that it has across the board as well. So it's really just a matter of sorting out what's going to work for you. And I would say, just to go back to 2 points that have been made already, with regard to Pinterest, I would say that it's not just for homemakers and people making craft items. I would say actually it's quite a big platform for photographers and people in design fields. Anything where there's a visual content involved. Pinterest is really taking off as quite a big social media platform at the moment. And I would also say, with regards to timing of social media posts, timing is crucial. There's no point me sending out, a social media post about something to do with business while people are actually busy at work. So, for instance, I send more of my tweets and messages out first thing in the morning, in the evening when people are travelling home, and just before and after lunch. There are certain times of the day that are much more crucial for getting a message across. If you want to advertise a new social activity, for instance, then actually post that in the evening when people are scrolling through their messages or Facebook pages or whatever, and they'll come across something thinking, oh, I might go to that on Saturday, but they're not going to see that during the day. So I would say timing is actually crucial.
Yeah. As well as timing, it's also selecting the right channel for your audience, isn't it? And you can do that by doing an audit, Jonathan. Would you agree?
Yeah, as I said before, do an audit. But there's a lot of information on Pinterest again in terms of infographics, which probably will help you to identify which social media attracts what sort of audience. So if you don't have an audit of your own target audience, but you have a fairly good idea of their demographic, go into Pinterest, type in infographic and social media, and you'll probably get a few guidelines off the information on there. And there are a couple of pages or images that tell you things like how often should you do Twitter, a message on Twitter, what sort of time of day is most likely to be seen. But again, it's very, very broad brush strokes because it's supposed to cover everybody, and it's based on lots and lots and lots of different types of clients. And Catherine's point is absolutely true. If you're targeting a certain group of people who target when they're going to be available to read a Twitter, if it's been there for a day, their chances are they're not going to see it. So, so if they're travelling home from work and they're available to read it, then hit them when they're available to read it. Kevin's example of the NHS, 9 o'clock on a Friday evening when they're sitting down to watch a certain program, and you send a message through to them to remind them that they've got an appointment, etc. Those things are actually sensible applications, but they're specific to target audience. So what you have to do is take the information that's in the infographics and then say, okay, how does that apply to the lifestyle of the people I'm trying to target? Now, sometimes your audience is going to be massively disparate, and all you can do is trial and error. Do stuff, see if it works. If it doesn't work, adjust it, try it again, and don't expect a result in 24 hours. Work on it and try different things every day. Write out a list of things that you might want to try and see which ones work. And it won't necessarily be what works in Twitter won't work necessarily in Facebook, etc. So it is a learning process. It's an iterative process, and you keep on having to try things out. And believe it or not, a lot of big organizations have to do the same thing. And if you then start changing your message, you have to start trial and error again, because not everything is appropriate. Time of day is a big function. Is it family oriented? Is it business oriented? What is it I'm trying to say? And each time you do it, it'll be a slightly different application within the environment. You'll probably still find that if Facebook worked for you in the first place, you can adapt what you're doing to what will work in Facebook and then transfer some of those learnings into other environments and other social engagement areas. But you're looking for, how do I engage my audience, and how are they likely to respond? Are you giving them something that they wouldn't be able to get elsewhere? If you are, then the chances are you've got a hook to keep them engaged with you.
Yeah,
Anyway.
exactly. Kevin, everyone's talking about timing, and you mentioned 9 o'clock in the evening, Catherine mentions in the evening, and so on and so forth. But that doesn't actually mean you have to be sitting down at 9 o'clock in the evening to compose 100-odd tweets, does it?
Absolutely not. And for example, we run the Marketing Gem account, and one of the features there, you can use a tool called TweetDeck, which is basically just a power user interface to the Twitter thing. So it's a little bit more complicated, but in there it gives you the option to schedule a tweet. So with my lady in the doctor's surgery, you know, she has about 12, 15 campaign messages that she wants to get out, and she was going, oh, I'll do them all now. And I was going, no, pace yourself, set them to go out, you know, pick your times like 8:30 Tuesday morning, 9 o'clock on Friday evening, schedule those so they go out. I have friends in the business who have various companies that if you have, if you're really serious about messaging, they will have power tools so that you author the message in their product, and then you say when and how it should be distributed, and you can queue all that stuff, and it all just happens. But there's lots of technological solutions, but really this stuff fits into have a communications plan, make sure that you have an account and that at least something each week goes out. Earlier somebody was talking about you know, to gain traction with followers, use competitions incentives. I would caution about that sort of thing in terms of building your network. It's best if you can do it organically. So, for example, at the surgery, I said to do little strips saying follow us on Twitter, and they were sort of all strategically placed around the waiting room, things like that. Also, one of the systems that I use a lot of people engage with is a system for booking appointments. So part of their message of the day, at the end of it says, follow us on Twitter. So think about where your customers, be they consumers or fellow business people, think about where they touch points for your business, and just sort of say, you know, find out more about us here, and then express your contact, how you want to be contacted.
Yeah. So, I mean, Alan, we've talked a lot about Twitter, but there's a lot more just Facebook and Twitter, isn't there? I mean, if you're going for a younger demographic, you might be better off using Snapchat, for example.
Personally, I've found that Twitter is, in my line of business, is miles ahead of any of the others in terms of generating leads and contacts. We had Facebook accounts. They weren't very good. I think it really depends on the nature of your business. If you're in a B2B business situation, then where you're trying to promote a service or product, I think Twitter is probably one of the more is certainly important. But don't limit yourself to that. Try them all. Try all the different ones and see what works for you. One thing I'd like to go back on though is that when I was talking about competitions and things for generating business, and going back to Kevin's point, I don't think that would be an appropriate mechanism for increasing followers for something like a doctor's surgery. So again, I think it depends on the nature of your business. The other thing was, one of the first things when you asked me about what was crucial, in the businesses that I've worked with, it has been followers that have been crucial because they've all tended to be global businesses, and when they are global, timing is actually less important because it doesn't matter where when you send a particular message out. It's 9 a.m. somewhere. So that's probably the reasons that maybe I've been saying something slightly differently from a few of the others. Although having said that, I have in my experience found that timing's not. Yes, it's important if you have got time critical messaging that you're wanting to get out there. That is appropriate. However, if it's general awareness and things like that you're seeking, or if you're retweeting a message from somebody else, because that's what you need to consider as well. It's not just about yourself. Try and retweet messages to do with the industry that you're in, so that it helps to establish yourself as a knowledge base or a sort of center of excellence for your particular industry, and people will naturally come to you. Others will forward your messages or send them to their own constituents, etc. But these are things that you need to consider.
Yeah. Okay. Catherine, when you're busy tweeting and everything, Facebooking, do you ever consider using paid to at Twitter for Business or promote the page on Facebook or?
I have used it on Facebook before. I haven't found it particularly beneficial, to be honest. The problem with Facebook is you don't know quite where it's going, and there have been issues with paying to boost a post or whatever, and you can get various interactions that aren't necessarily people. It's a bit of a dodgy ground, I think, at the moment. I spoke to lots of people who tried paid advertising and paid boosting, whatever, and it doesn't always work. But I would say actually there's enough free stuff out there to embrace, not to have to worry about that. And what I use, I have heard of TweetDeck, but I don't use it. I use Hootsuite. And actually that allows me to spend about an hour every morning just posting maybe half a dozen posts throughout the day, but it will go to all my different platforms. So I'll do one post and it will go to Twitter, to Facebook, to Google+. For my business, it will go to LinkedIn as well. And Hootsuite saves me a hell of a lot of time. It also means that you can schedule it to whatever time of day, and you can schedule certain posts for certain times of day. I tend to keep them all business chat at either end of the day and at lunchtimes. If it's something a little bit more of interest, whether it's global, whether it's local, national, or whatever, those interest things will tend to be spread throughout the day, so that if someone's got a little bit of downtime, they'll think, oh, so-and-so's got some interest in this as well, maybe we'll have a conversation. And actually I think it's much more to do with making connections with people, referrals through those connections as well. I mean, you very rarely get to meet anybody face-to-face through social media connections, but you can get to know a little bit more about them, and obviously they get to know about you as well, whether it's you as a person or you as a brand or you as a charity. As I say, for a lot of the things that we do as a charity, a lot of that, advertising and promotion for what we do is sent out through social media, not just to the people involved, who, of course, if you're holding an event at a local hotel, you'll want to send out a Twitter message that includes them, so that when they get it, they're sending it to their customer base as well, and so the message travels. It's important to understand that, yeah, absolutely, there are different platforms for different types of events, so it's important to remember that.
Kevin, would you say when you're starting out that you should sort of think about attacking using, I should say, 3 or 4 different media channels, or is it a case of start with one, get competent with that, and then add a second one to it, and so on and so forth?
I guess if the answer is obvious which platform that you need to be using, go with that. If you're not sure, try all 3. So just
which are the 3, Kevin, that you would recommend?
Well, I think the big 3 for the UK for consumers are Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and that's going to cover 90% of people who are using social media.
And
LinkedIn,
Google Plus then in that list.
Google Plus, less than 2% usage. Other than Diane and you, never met anybody in the real world who uses it. One other thing about social media, for example, is if you're going to conferences and stuff, do advertise on social media. So, for example, in my line of work, there's a big trade show in Amsterdam, sort of in September, and a lot of the people there will say, there's the formal events and so on and so on, but quite often sort of say, we'll all meet up in this bar. So if, for example, you say you go to Birmingham for a business meeting, you've got a bit of a following, and you're going to be waiting 2 hours for the train back to London or something, do post in the social media saying, I'm hanging out in this cool venue in Birmingham, do call by and say hello. Things like that, use it that way. You can drive engagement with. So, for example, Facebook, at the large company that I worked for, where we disposed of a business for a substantial sum, we actually had 3 employees who were monitoring Facebook 12 hours a day. This was a mass market product. It was the sort of product that we sold it at such a small point that basically even the cost of us responding to individuals on Facebook meant that we were losing money on that particular transaction. So we're looking at a product with wafer thin margins, but by having people on Facebook saying things like, terribly sorry to hear of this problem, it's very important when you get the product to do the latest firmware update because of the way the thing worked. This thing was designed 2 years previously, and it left the factory with firmware from a year ago, but if you wanted it to work on, say, Windows 10 or whatever, you needed to do the updates. So, there was a lot of pain just around those things, and we found that the best way of dealing with that was just having people on the forums. I noticed, for example, if you have BT, they have fantastic support on Twitter. You just go, I hate BT because... and add at BT Care, and again, I think there must have been 20 people straight back at you saying, "Oh, terribly sorry to hear this," and they'll signpost you, and
I've experienced that as well. They are immediate, aren't they?
Yeah. So a lot of companies,
help, of course, but
yeah, and even for example, I was getting a passport through the Irish Embassy, and in fact, Twitter was an amazing channel to deal with them because they're too busy. The answer time to do a phone call was 25-30 minutes. I tweeted them and they followed me back. I was able to direct message them with some application numbers and stuff, and so those are low-cost channels that are easy for people to be served by. So think about your business and how it's a unique proposition.
Kevin, how do you think that it translates to small businesses, though? Because I think possibly large businesses might benefit from large instant social media. Actually, that's wrong. I'm not thinking they benefit more, but they may be set up differently, and their objectives may be different from the small business. I mean, can you think of how small businesses would interact with social media and the customers?
I think, for example, if you're a traveling salesperson, and you're in various towns and you want to take on new business, post that you're doing your salesperson's trip. Make sure that you allow time to spend an hour in a Costa coffee shop. Be available to people to walk up to you. Make appointments, things like that. It's you look at what your business is. You look at how you're getting customers. And if you find that you've got 2 customers in the town of Leicester, well, it seems sensible then, to take out some online advertising about your business, saying that we're doing stuff in Leicester, because the search, the search-based advertising. I know, for example, that Virgin Media, they have campaigns that are triggered by rainstorms. So when it rains, they know from the forecast when it's going to rain. They then place ads so that people who are frustrated with their satellite TV reception get their ads. So it's that kind of thing. The advantage of the small company is you can be nimble, you can be quick. You don't have to ask for permission. You just go and do it. And
there's also a personal interaction as well, isn't there? If you're, for instance, if you're, I'll tell you a story. I was in Gauchos in the city a few months ago, and we were having a perfectly lovely meal. And I use Swarm a lot. I use Foursquare, Swarm, and that also links to my Twitter, which links to Facebook, and it posts all over the place. So I just said, we're having a lovely meal in this lovely restaurant, and obviously copied in their Twitter profile as well. What happened next was a few minutes later, they came over to us and said, just read your Twitter message. That was really lovely. Here, have a couple of glasses of champagne. And what happens next is, of course, I then go back on social media and say, well, these lovely people just gave us champagne. Come and eat in this restaurant. So it's the personal engagement as well. On a very one-to-one level, it means you can talk directly to whoever's running these establishments, whether it's a restaurant, a bar, a pub, or any local business. That direct referral is invaluable to them.
And of course, it also means that they can talk. Not only can the customers talk directly to the client, but the client or the company can talk directly to their customers, can't it, Jonathan?
Yeah, and think about it when you're doing it. What is the contribution that you're making to this community? Because that, in a sense, is part of the engagement, and that is how these things work. Because if you keep on doing positive things, then word gets around. And so it's not. Old-fashioned media was about a one-way message, hence most of it was known as broadcast. Whereas these are about engagement. These are about having a conversation. And therefore, when you put out a message, hopefully expect some kind of comeback, some kind of feedback. So yeah, that's the sort of thing to think about, how you can add to their experience. And one of the things that I used to do for a client at one stage was making, if you like, short content films for some technical products about how to do quite difficult technical things on the machines. And those were posted on YouTube, but they were also linked to the website. This is part of the facility of using stuff that's on the internet, because it didn't cost us anything effectively to distribute. So it cost us a bit of money to make the films and time and things like that. but they all added to the consumer's experience of the product, and therefore they had a positive, and they helped with our engagement with our customers.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think time is running against us. Very quickly, Alan, what would be your one tip if you were advising an SME on their social media?
Oh, one tip. I mean, I think of quite a few things. I mean, one of the things is one thing I would say is make sure that your content is relevant. You are sending information, either tweets or updating information on Facebook regularly, so it encourages people to read it, to visit it, or to retweet it. And remember, it's not. There are two other things I would say is that one, it's not just about yourself. Include other things from the industry, so that it establishes yourself as an industry guru in this area, and also social media is potentially, even if you're sitting in somewhere in Watford, for example, with a small business, your social media messages can be read globally. So it gives you as big a reach as the major companies that you are up against. It sort of levels the playing field, in my view. So you can bat with the big boys, as it were.
Okay. Jonathan, what would be your one social media tip?
Remember, it's a very dynamic marketplace, so keep on experimenting. People were talking about Facebook. Apparently, and I don't know the exact figures, but the influence of Facebook has halved in the last year as a social media.
What would be your one tip for when you're advising people, like the GPs or other people about social media?
Plan. Make sure you have clear, specific goals. So, working with this GP, we have a target of 250 followers from the practice. So that then represents a really valuable channel to potentially hard to reach other ways patients.
Okay. And Catherine, what would be your one tip?
It's more than one, I'm afraid, Diane. I have a short list. It's very short. First, I would remember your customers are mostly already using social media, so it's important to engage with it. It will help you connect with your clients and your suppliers, another important audience to think about. It allows people to write good reviews and easily recommend you, and you can receive instant feedback on what you're doing. But the downside of that is it also makes you very accountable, as bad reviews spread fast on social media as well. I would say it also allows you to learn about your audience, gain market intelligence, and especially if you're going to use tools in social media such as Google Analytics, Facebook Insights, and Hootsuite tools. Get your stats on who's engaging with you and go from there. You can find new customers by making new connections and benefiting from introductions. You can create meaningful relationships with people and potential new clients. You can share content easily that will benefit others. It's not just all about what you're doing in your own bubble, and you can benefit your community relations with others around you. It's mostly free. It's if it's not free, it's a low-cost way of allowing you to increase your own brand awareness and reach potential new customers. And you can access information around the clock, around the world. I'll leave you with a little thought from someone who I've connected with on social media. I've never met the guy, but he's a lovely guy called Neil Giller from Central Direct Mailing, and he recommended having a power hour every morning. I use between 7 and 8 o'clock in the morning. I use Hootsuite. I get all my posts done, dusted for the day, and then actually reap some of the benefits throughout the day, people connecting, interacting, and engaging through that.
Okay, that's very good. And you're watching the Marketing Gem, which is sponsored by Link for Growth. And each week I ask the panel for their one general marketing tip of the week that's say relevant to not necessarily to the show, but to what is happening in the marketing world. So, Kevin.
My tip is just something that I was reading about in the paper I hadn't heard before. I'm sure everybody's heard of product placement, where people pay for their product to be seen, pay for the product to be seen in use in television and films. But I heard of this thing called product displacement, where companies that are doing things, say for example, sugary drinks, pay for, so for example, there was some controversy about Coca-Cola paying researchers to not use the phrase Coca-Cola when talking about obesity and problems like that, but instead to talk about sugary carbonated drinks. So that was something that just amused me, that people pay to have their product seen being used, and some people pay to have the product not to be used.
Right, well, I'm not sure I go along with that, but anyway, Alan.
Having said that, that's something I've used in the past. is displacement, but and it's been quite successful. But my one tip of the week is that social media is crucially important. We're talking about it's related obviously to this this program. But what I would suggest is, if you want to read further on it, just Google Richard Branson's thoughts on the importance of social media. There's an excellent article that he has posted, and it will give you a lot of further insight and thoughts into why you should be using social media.
Okay, Jonathan?
As I said earlier on, go on to Pinterest, look at the infographics. I've got a little thing there of what I think are infographics that would be useful to SME marketing. So that will give you some profiles of the various different social media areas. In all your aspects of marketing, remember that you are part of a community and your objective is to make a positive contribution to that community. And if you've got that in the background, that's going to stand you in pretty good stead. And building on Catherine's point of view, even if it's only a half an hour a day, but take time out to manage what is going on in your social media environment. Don't just put stuff up there and then leave it for a month and find out what happens. Have a regular appointment to manage it. Okay?
Okay, that's great. And Catherine?
I would finish with recommending looking at all the different opportunities that there are on social media. As I say, we've mentioned all the popular ones: Facebook, Twitter, Google+, for the 2% that use it, Snapchat, Instagram. Some are more youth-orientated than others, obviously. Pinterest, Periscope, heading into the realms of video, YouTube, Vimeo, Spotify for the musos amongst us. It's all connecting and sharing info. Swarm, Foursquare for the foodies and whatever amongst us as well. LinkedIn, Referral Key, Skill Pages, Plaxo, Names, Clout, Google Analytics, Hootsuite, Facebook Insights, Twitter Management, Unfollowers, TweetDeck, and all the rest of it. But also remember lots of companies operate, companies, organisations, charities operate social media platforms as well. Watford Three River Trusts operates Yammer, and I think Google Plus is responsible for meetups as well. They're all forms of sharing on social media as well. And of course our own Link for Growth, sponsors of the show, and the social media networks and events that happen within that. And I would say explore all the different forms of social media out there. There is so much out there that could be passing you by. Make things easy for your audience, make things engaging for your audience, and I would say it's not all about work. It's partly about information, it's about motivation and inspiration, and to reiterate what Jonathan said, we're all part of the community. It's good to interact.
Yeah, my tip of the week is on social media, since that's been this week's subject, is that you should have as it were, separate accounts for your personal and your business things rather than having it all as one. And also to remember that your business page is a representation of your business. It needs to be, as Jonathan pointed out right at the very beginning of the show, it needs to be integrated with all your other marketing activities and messages, and it's not just a standalone thing. And on that point, I say cheerio. And Alan?
Yep. I've enjoyed today's show. It's been hopefully it's been informative and people have learned something from it. But thanks very much for inviting me to take part.
Okay, pleasure. Catherine?
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. If anybody wants to know anything more about my experiences with social media, tweet me.
Or blog you.
Or blog me.
Perhaps we should write a blog.
Absolutely.
Jonathan?
Well, yeah, thank you for inviting me to take part. It's been a good time. I've learned quite a lot. I hope everyone else has. And, you know, one last take out, follow me. But remember, if you're doing social media, that's what you want people to do, to engage with you. Okay?
Exactly. And Kevin, sorry.
Well, I'd say, and remember, social media is an international thing, so if you're interested in what I'm saying, you'll find me on Weibo, the Chinese version of Twitter, but failing that, at KLynchK on the classic Twitter will also get me.
Okay, well, we'll start. Anyway, this is how you can get in touch with everyone via Twitter and via the various social media channels and things like that. You hope you've enjoyed the show, and we will be back next week with more another subject. Hopefully it'll be something that you suggested, as this week's subject was. Someone did get in touch with us through the Marketing Gem on Twitter, and that's why we discussed this particular subject this week. We hope that they found it useful, and we hope you found it useful. Bye-bye.